Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm your host, Jessica Wilson. For folks who are new here or were too afraid to listen to this episode the first time it came out, I'm replaying it. This is the path to make America healthy again. It reviews how it started and who was leading it as it got going. It's a story about finding a sympathetic group of people and selling them on something that just sounds really good. It's important to understand how we got here and the way one passionate guy named Jeff can influence the course of history. Before that, let's get into some episode feedback with my dad and his brief thoughts on RFK.
From the episode about Mark Hyman, how about a scientific discussion refuting Dr. Hyman's ideas? This sounds like two stupid junior high mean girls discussing a guy they really like but won't admit.
You are a mean girl!
I gotta say, I do enjoy Mark. He makes me laugh a lot. The stupid junior high mean girls is an interesting association. Okay, how about a scientific discussion refuting his ideas? His ideas are so unhinged, there's not an opportunity to have a scientific discussion. He believes that gluten causes autism.
Wow.
So there is no study refuting or saying that gluten doesn't cause autism because that would be silly. So another one of both.
So how can you say that if?
Yeah, but they believe perhaps that Dr. Hyman is correct. So I need to show evidence that he's not correct.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't come up with can't blame something on something without a study of some sort.
So there isn't
There's no
one. No. There's also a belief that...
You know how many people eat gluten?
Right, and don't have one.
Daily, since forever.
Yes. Mark is also of the RFK cohort that believes that mercury causes autism.
So we got gluten now, we got mercury too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And would you like to share how you used to interact with...
No, we just play with mercury.
Mm-hmm. It was just you or all of y'all?
Just about everybody thought this stuff was fantastic. Boy, I mean, you pour it in your hands and wow, you know.
Mm-hmm. Roll it around. Yeah.
Put it on the counter and you roll it out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we play with mercury all the time.
Do all of you have autism?
No.
I don't think so.
Not. I'm sorry.
So maybe that is not a direct cause of autism.
I can tell you some other people that played with mercury when they were in high school because they thought it was neat.
What about him?
Oh, Wayne did. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So not just y'all, but many other people.
Yeah, a lot of people play with mercury.
Yeah, who don't have autism.
There are a lot of people. They claim. The tuna.
Yes, too much mercury.
Yeah, there's a lot of mercury in the tuna. That's what people say.
That's what people say.
And from the scuttlebutt that was on the boat this time, they were talking about people were getting tested and they had a lot of mercury in their system, which I kind of don't.
I mean, it makes sense if you're eating a bunch of it, but
you have to eat it daily. I mean, every 3 meals a day.
I don't know. We got to figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Ready.
Go on to.
Also
from Mark's episode, if you think Big Pharma isn't getting rich from expensive medication, you're kidding yourself. Much of the medication we take are not any more necessary than the supplements being sold by Mark Hyman.
I always find it interesting that people think that I cannot think multiple things are true at the same time. If I'm saying Mark is making a lot of money off of his supplements, it seems that people think that I'm saying that Big Pharma isn't getting rich from medications. Those are two different things, and I must be kidding myself. Much of the medications we take are not any more necessary than the supplements being sold by Mark. Much is curious. Antibiotics, vaccines, Paxlovid, yeah, right? All of these things seem more necessary than the Lysol that we were supposed to drink to prevent COVID.
What?
You missed that. Okay, we'll come back.
Oh, that was bleach, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe.
No, Trump. Yeah, what was it? The lady
Ivermectin. Oh, the lady.
The lady that kind of hung her head down because I was watching it. She just kind of swung her head down and shook her head. What was it?
The ivermectin?
No, he was talking about injecting bleach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So Big Pharma is
getting... So we can drink bleach and... Well, by his belief, I mean, you would drink a little bleach or iodine or
I don't know.
Some sort of disinfectant, and
we'd be good.
We'd be cool.
That seems like a holistic response. Okay.
I don't think holistic.
I was joking. Okay. Big Pharma and Big Mark are able to get rich. Okay.
Yes. Continue?
Yep.
Okay, from the same episode about Mark. I also love when ultra-rich folks get their supplements by IV, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So wellness retreats, or I've seen vans that will come to your office or parties and give everybody an IV.
Oh, Lord, no.
B12 and other vitamins. And there are a bunch of clinics, especially in LA, where you can show up like after your night, if you have a hangover.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can show up and be rehydrated.
Oh, my gosh.
Voluntary, just, getting stuck.
No, that's the, well, I've had IV. Well, when I got pneumonia, I got IV. You have to lay in a bed for what? How long? I mean, it's not stuff, it's just a drip, boy. It's not,
It's true.
No, I mean, you have to lay there and let this stuff, drip for an hour, 2 hours, or something like that.
I'm seeing an opportunity.
Opportunity to do what?
To make you
What?
Try an IV.
Fuck you. Excuse me. No.
No.
For what good reason?
Just to experiment and be able to tell people what it's like.
To get a supplement by IV? It seems so ridiculous and so unnecessary. I mean, do I really, okay, I'm only taking supplements now because the body just doesn't process this. I'm not in this,
You're old, so you're taking B12. You're black, so you're taking vitamin D. Also old.
Old.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a term.
What a term.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, and please, an episode on leaky guts, boy. I mean,
okay. That's
the IV. You have to be. I think the IV is getting the system from the wrong direction.
What?
Your supplements and everything, I mean, aren't they go through the digestive system? Through liver?
I see what you're saying.
Granted, your blood's circulating.
I see.
Throughout the body, but
it hasn't been filtered by your organs.
Yeah.
I got you.
I mean,
it's a good point.
You threw an IV in there as an emergency, boom,
it's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. IV is, the guy's dehydrated or something,
I mean, dehydration, I can see an IV, but all those vitamins, I don't see.
I don't see that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Getting that by IV is something you're bypassing a
bunch of systems.
You're bypassing part of what your body was designed for.
Okay.
Wow. I don't believe people doing it.
Thanks to the person who...
Can you OD on...
these are questions that we could get answers to.
Ooh.
Okay. Bird flu.
Bird flu from the bird flu episode by Dr. Doherty. Thank you. This is a very interesting episode.
Okay. Anything that you want to go out on?
Please rate, review, follow, and subscribe.
Oh, actually, let me ask you.
Yes.
Dad.
Yes.
What do you think about the RFK of it all?
I think, man, it's pretty... I don't want to make him...
You don't want to say anything rude about it?
It's kind of not... he's uninformed.
Okay. Because you were watching the regular news and you couldn't answer.
And he would just show part of... I mean, you watched the whole confirmation. I just kind of watched part of it. They took part. And... He could not answer. He couldn't answer a question. He didn't have. The man was totally. He's
unprepared.
Not even.
Unprepared
is something like I do. I'm doing right here now. I'm unprepared. This boy just didn't have a damn idea.
Unintelligent.
He just didn't have any. He had no idea.
Okay, couldn't answer what Medicare or Medicaid was.
At least he should have reviewed these before he went.
Right.
Did he have a coach?
I think that he was banking on just being a Kennedy and being able to bypass.
At some point, somebody should have coached. Hey, look, they're gonna. here's some basic information. I mean, give him a cheat sheet. I don't know.
Yeah, he's got a speech there.
He couldn't put up his things there, like people teleprompters, anything like. But at least write it on your sleeve. Do something about a cheat sheet. Or of course, hold on a minute. Let me look that shit up.
Yeah.
It's like they just tossed him out there, and
I think he tossed himself out there.
Yeah, I think so. And, simply because he was a Trump appointee, I mean, they knew he was
confirmed.
He's going to get confirmed no matter what, no matter if he couldn't even spell Medicare.
Okay.
But he didn't have it.
No.
So, I mean, will he do a good job?
No.
I don't think so, especially if he's tries to be in charge, and that's what you just got to walk in there and and follow what everybody else is doing if you're going to do it. That's the only way he's going to be able to do a good job.
If he has good advisors?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And I think they fired everybody in it.
But he's going to appoint new people, and I'm afraid of these.
Hell is he know?
Podcast people, but he's got a few doctors that are fans both of his and Mark, and
so he's going to be the blind's going to be leading the blind.
Kaylee and Cassie Means, I'm sure, are going to be in there.
So he's here again. A whole bunch of people that don't know anything.
I mean, they think they know something. They know.
RFK thinks he knows something.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can't know more than he does. That won't work. I mean, if somebody comes in there, well, I know more about this than you do. And then,
I'm sure he'll be okay with that because he knows nothing.
Yeah. You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
I am so glad that this is a test period for the nation. I think I am thrilled that this is happening. This is a test period? It's a stress test. We're failing. You and I, in a week, traveling. To Trampus's farm. Trampus's farm in Grants Pass. Yep. Yeah, we're going to explore his farm, the farmer's market. Mm-hmm. Cool. We'll see it. Take a look. All right. Thanks, Dad. You're welcome. And here's the episode with Jeff Hutt. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited we were able to make this work. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself? Yeah, I have. I work in politics, so I've been working in this third-party political space for a while. That's not between Democrat and not between Republican. It's not either one of those two. It's the place in between where we try to come to conclusions and we try to find compromises where we can without either side losing their values, but really working towards what politics are supposed to be, a place where you can dialogue and we can have this. And I've been pretty successful on a local candidate level within my county and with the state of Texas. When RFK Jr. announced that he was going to run, I realized that it was a historic moment. One, we had just come out of the COVID mandates and the COVID lockdowns. And so you had this individual who was different than any other candidate, who really came out aggressively questioning what was being said. And then on the second side, you had a person with the last name of Kennedy. So I realized that just from a political standpoint, you adding these two things together, it was going to be successful. So back last year in June, May, June, I got on the campaign as a volunteer. And there was no real structure yet. We stood up Texas. I became the state lead of Texas. And then in January, when my now colleague, Jared Volt, stepped down, I became the national field director for the Kennedy campaign. And I was the national field director from then through the middle of June. And so that's sort of my political background. I've worked a lot in coalition building. One of the things that really brought me and I found interesting about the Kennedy campaign was just the folks who I met. It was a lot of people that I would say are within your world. And I didn't realize that there was really these warriors out there who were fighting and they were organized and they were doing things. Medical freedom was part of it. There was also this environmental aspect to it, but folks who are really, I've always felt like I was walking with giants.
just the caliber of people that I got to associate with, who were volunteering for the campaign, who looked up to me as a political expert when I was actually looking up to them, because they were just experts in what they had done. A lot of C-level sort of folks who came into the campaign. And that's what really got me excited, was just this this group of individuals who I started to work with. And I just, after the campaign, after Mr. Kennedy stepped down and endorsed Donald Trump, I wanted to stay on with the movement and continue forward. And that's how myself and some colleagues got together. And that's where the Make America Healthy Again PAC came about.
Okay, tell me what the genesis and the evolution was to be making it a PAC for sure.
So there was a group of our founders, all come from with a campaign. We were all on the field side. So these are the doers and the people who actually move the needle politically in the campaign. We knock doors, we do these things, organize. But so myself and 4 of my former colleagues got together. And it was about in July, we realized that Mr. Kennedy was not on the debate stage, and you have to be on the debate stage to be taken serious. And at that point, we started to encourage Mr. Kennedy to endorse President Trump as his only way to carry forward these aspirations and dreams of what the supporters who we worked with. And if we had wound up with November, and Mr. Kennedy had got 3% of the vote across the country, he would have had a whole group of supporters and volunteers who just would have been crushed. So we were really encouraging him, and a lot of other people from a lot of sides were encouraging him, and he was making his own decisions. But when he came out and he actually put his campaign on recess and he endorsed President Trump, there was some confusion in the messaging about where to vote for Mr. Kennedy, where not to, what states to. And we, myself and these 4 other campaign workers, we got together and formed the Make America Healthy Again PAC. And our goal was, on the short term, was to encourage Kennedy voters, no matter where they were, to come out and vote for President Trump. And the reason this is that we felt it would be a soul-sucking experience if Mr. Kennedy came out and endorsed President Trump and then President Trump lost. So all of this effort that he put in, and we felt that if us having some political knowledge and us having this expertise, if we could win states in a manner where we can demonstrate that the Kennedy vote was what turned the tide, that we could help Mr. Kennedy as he went into the transition team and really legitimize his space at the table. So that's where we are. But so we have sort of a, that's our short-term goal. And that's only for the next 29, 28 days until the election. After that, our goal is to look at candidates who espouse and who are willing to put forward these principles that we talk about, the Make America Healthy Again principles, which is, clean water, clean food, clean environment. And a big thing is we talk about corporate capture. And I think within your book, I think you allude, your book is a lot about that, the way that corporations don't view people as people, but just as a dollar sign anymore. So going forward, what PACs normally do is they normally do media buys, advertising. So we're going to look for candidates across the United States who support these things. And we're going to try to make the political dialogue in a way where we can move the needle based upon these simple principles, move it out of guns, abortion, things that really affect some people dramatically. But for most of us, we rarely come in contact with it. However, water, quality of water, what goes into our food. These things are every day, and it's what affects all Americans. And that's really where we want to be, kind of this unifying force. And there's a lot of talk about Mr. Kennedy, and we talk about the unity ticket and things like that. But it's unifying America around values and around things that are important, and then shutting out the noise of the things that distract us.
Can you break down these 4 principles a bit more?
Oh, yes. The first one is it's really about health, and it's really about what goes into our bodies and the chemicals that are used, and the over processing of food. And that's really number one, is just, and that, that gets into big ag, and that gets into a lot of just And that's important because there's been this natural movement. There's been this movement by corporations to this place that we're at now. So it's about rolling back some of that power that these executive agencies have, transparency in what they're doing.
Yes.
Second one is it's regenerative farming, which is a it's a real fancy way to say that we need to have like good soil.
Right.
And we need to stop putting these massive pesticides on our products, but on our food stuff, because this is what we eat. And finally, it comes down to corporate capture. And this is kind of the overall arching thing, the archer message, where corporations have captured things like the EPA, the FDA. We see it in the pharmaceutical capture of our agencies. It happens also in big ag. And then it also spreads into other things like the war machine too. Whereas we are spending money on overseas wars to help corporations here that make those instruments of war.
Yeah.
So those are the three big things. And we also focus on the environment, but the environment is kind of encompassed in all of those.
Sure.
And a lot of that is the folks who are on our campaign and who we associate with, they kind of come from those worlds. So it really was easy for us to meld that into a political action committee.
No, that makes a lot of sense. With the healthy again portion, is there a time that you all are looking back to when things were going well or were healthier than they are now?
That's actually that's a great question. I've never been asked that, but yeah, I guess it is. I guess it is before the days when we had politicians in Washington who were more concerned about the individuals than they were with enriching corporations that gave them money. And this would be a return to, our grandparents. My grandmother had a farm, grew a little farm, and they did things. And an idea where we are growing our own food if we can in our homes, making that cool again. Moving towards this place where it was back in a time, you look in the 60s and 70s, and I think Mr. Kennedy talks about this very well. Things like diabetes and stuff like that were not prevalent in our diet. So we really see a time when corporations became stronger. They they started to play more important roles within Washington, D.C. And then we saw our food sources the ingredients get less healthy, more cost effective for them. It started to become over processed. I love to tell the story is that, Hershey's candy bars in Europe aren't called chocolate. They're called chocolate flavor. And this idea that we're moving, our food source is moving away from being food to this manufactured thing that we eat.
Got it. Yes. I've heard RFK Jr. talk about his growing up and being one of, is it 10 or 11 or 12 siblings?
Something like that. It's
double digits. However many. Yes. He was talking, I think, to is it Callie Means? He was talking about how when he was growing up, no one had, chronic illnesses. No one had autism amongst his cousins and things like that. And it sounded to me like he was looking for people to experience something similar to that childhood when folks were healthier.
And I would, I think I'm 51, so I take it back to a time where I remember growing up, and we were healthy, and we spent time outside, and school lunches were healthy, and even the snack foods that our parents fed us a lot of times weren't the best foods. But if you compare those same ingredients then, and compare those ingredients now, they're night and day for what they were, and sort of that change. And I think that's what, when Mr. Kennedy talks about that, he talks about really, and I really couldn't, it's a good question. I don't know when to pinpoint when things started to change. Maybe sometime in the 90s, I would say things really started to change. I was a child of the 70s and 80s. So things hadn't changed that much from my sister, who was about 11 years older than me, my parents. But it seemed like in the 90s and starting the late 80s, 90s, 2000s, we really started to see this shift in our food supplies in terms of just the ingredients going in it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've heard in the context of like a lot of money was going into tobacco. And then when a lot of the regulations kind of tamped down on that, money shifted then into food in order to, still create that corporate capture you were talking about and still continue to make more and more money.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I can't verify, but that was
No.
something that was discussed on Charlie Kirk and Dr. Means on a podcast recently too. So yeah, I think you were right. Yeah, the 90s, totally. How is the PAC talking about food specifically? You mentioned what you were eating versus what kids are being fed today. Are there any like specific things that people point to or any specific ingredients that people have?
Well, right now what we're doing is so our job is there's a media aspect for our job, and we have some billboards going out in Wisconsin.
Oh.
Our real focus has been for our PAC has been Michigan and Wisconsin. And Mr. Kennedy tried to get off the ballot in those two states, and they wouldn't let him. So Mr. Kennedy's on the ballot in those two states. And what we would hate for is President Trump to lose the election by 20,000 votes in Michigan and Mr. Kennedy have 25,000.
Right.
So a lot of times we're targeting those areas. And so far we've been targeting them about what goes into the pesticides and what we've been putting on our pesticides and stuff in those areas. Mm-hmm. But we're not really at this point, because of where we're at in the election, we're not really diving down into a lot of the particulars. Okay. And this is where we're going to go. We have people who have come on to our PAC as advisors, these areas. And as we go forward, we're going to really build out that information packet, and we're going to really look at working with candidates. And what's interesting is you have a lot of, so our goal is to help candidates out, and you have a lot of candidates who are in their own right expertise in these different aspects. And this is how they come to the politics, or they come to the place that we're at. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, these well-intended people, they don't have the backing of large PACs. They don't have the backing of sort of corporate government. Mm-hmm. And that's where we come in. We're good at our jobs, and with a little bit of money that we can level the playing field in a lot of these, say, state races and congressional districts.
Mm-hmm. Is there a message that's particular to those two states? You mentioned the farming and pesticide use. Is there a conversation about either sustainable farming or soil health in those areas? Do you know?
There is, and we've actually been lucky enough to have somebody come on to our PAC who is regenerative farming is what he does. And his name is Andrew, and he actually goes out, and we have X Spaces, and he spends time in X Spaces talking about these things with other people. And it's, like the idea of regenerative farming is so important, because it not only goes into what we eat, but this idea of having moisture in the soil, having good soil also helps the earth keep cool. So these things that we're doing, as humans, we're only able to see one little aspect of what we do and our impact. Mm-hmm. But what's great is to have folks come along like Andrew, who can really help explain, no, it's not this impact, right? But this thing that you're doing is impacting us across several aspects. And it's just, so, farming being up in Wisconsin and Michigan is big. A lot of it also is what we talk about, the unity ticket. So there's a real hesitancy in some areas, that important areas like Wisconsin, say for instance, that they may have been a Kennedy supporter, but they have a hard time voting for Donald Trump.
Sure.
And I mean, that's perfectly understandable.
Yeah. Sure.
I worked for Kennedy, and I have a hard time voting for Donald Trump also, but I understand that this is our pathway forward. So our goal is to really help convince those voters to come out and say, Mr. Kennedy has made it okay to vote for President Trump. There are some, these issues that we had with him. Mr. Kennedy has addressed some of the trust issues. President Trump has come out and said that when he first won office in 2016, the three words that you never heard was Trump transition team.
Oh, okay.
He entered the White House without his posse. And in my words, not his, but that he was overrun by the establishment, and he's tapped Mr. Kennedy to help him out with the transition team. And that's big. And for the movement and for folks who are around our movement, that's really big, because we were, like I said, we were able to engage folks across the United States who are experts in their field, regenerative farming. They were medical freedom, the environment. And hopefully what we'll see is that we're able to win in such a way that's demonstrative. And some of these folks who were within the campaign, these experts, our volunteers and our supporters, they will be able to have these offices in Washington, D.C., and they'll be able to enter these ABC institutions in Washington, and they'll be able to make systematic change. Because it's from a political point, a lot of the things we talk about, it's hard for, if you're a U.S. congressman, because you're running for office every 2 years. Senators really don't deal with a lot. The president is the same way. But if we really want to make systemic change, we need to get good folks into these departments.
Got it.
And this is our focus, to make sure this happens. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
That makes a lot of sense. You actually teed up my next question, which was going to be, Kennedy is looking for a place. Is that my understanding?
The HHS is what they've talked about. And he might be like the Moses. He might bring people to the promised land, but not actually go to the promised land. It's because HHS secretaries have to pass through the Senate.
Okay.
And he may not be able to get himself passed through the Senate.
Gotcha.
So he may not have an official title within Washington, but his title might be advisor to the president, something like that. And then there are about, I've heard numbers between 6,000 and 14,000 presidential appointees. Most of those, or half of those, do not have to go through the Senate to be confirmed. For the larger positions that they do. So I would imagine that he would like it. I bet you it's a lot of work being head of one of these administrative agencies. But I'm guessing that he'll be is an advisor to the president. And he'll be one of those folks. And if you look through sort of the past, and I got to use Hillary Clinton because she's what popped in my mind. Sure. Sidney Blumenthal was a person who was not in the White House, not official, but he was somebody who advised her. And you have these folks who work behind the scenes with the presidents, and I think he'd be great at that. He's been doing for a long time in terms of the environment, medical freedom. So he has a network across the country of strong people, experts on it, who we can call on. One of our advisors is Lynn Redwood. And she was an early advocate in the medical freedom movement, and she was outstanding. And she's her and her husband, Tommy, who is an ER surgeon, are just some of the best people like I've met. And so he has folks like them that he can call on to help advise him. And I'm hoping that President Trump, if he wins, will be smart enough to understand this resource that he has and to take advantage of it.
That's helpful. Can we get into the corporate capture of it all? Do you know when RFK Jr. became really interested in understanding the gravity of the corporate interest in food and health?
I would imagine that in his work through, he worked on the Hudson River. He worked with water keepers on things, and that was probably his first looking into it. And then he started working with this medical freedom, and they started to look at vaccines. And this is a topic where, like, we start vaccines and everybody's like, well, it was more about, we have these questions about vaccines. They're not tested in the same way that other things are tested. There's certain liabilities that have been waived from them, from the manufacturer's vaccines. I really think that's the point where they came in and they started looking at how big pharma had taken over medicine. And that was probably the most obvious example
Yeah.
of corporate capture. And then you have the Ukrainian war, and you see what happens in how it was sort of, the United States and certain allies pushed the Ukrainian war when there was chances for peace early on. And then there was this real, and I would have to say you also see it through Gulf War I in the 90s and Gulf War II in the 2000s, this really the enriching of certain corporations.
Yeah.
And what I think now is you look back and it's really questionable foreign policy. Time has really told on some of these tells that they told us to get the Americans involved and get us all riled up like it's time we go to war. Time has kind of showed that what's really happened is we've lost a lot of blood, American blood, and a lot of treasure. And not to name the countless, lives that were lost in those countries that were affected, which is something we need to take into consideration. But I would say that these are all aspects that probably had a big impact on him, both in his career as a lawyer and working with the medical freedom and his opposition to what he's termed, and I think is a good word, the forever wars.
I'm so glad you brought up vaccines, because in a lot of the interviews I've been listening to, COVID has come up regularly and a through line. Can you speak outside of the vaccines of it all, but any, language that you see that, fits?
We'd have these national volunteer calls, and I'd go into the states, these Zoom calls that we'd have, and I'd talk to state volunteers. And one of the things I always like to do is just to break the ice is like, how did you come to the Kennedy campaign?
Yeah.
Where were you at? The majority of the people that I met came to the campaign and through kind of the response to COVID and what happened. And I think it was this huge unifying force in our country. So these folks were really prevalent through our campaign. And it was, and if you look at Pew polling, it's over at 50% now of Americans who question the COVID mandates and the COVID vaccines at this time. So it was a growing part. So this is a real important part of, I think, Mr. Kennedy's message. And it's really what propelled him as he was coming into office was that reaction. And so I'm a board member of the Texas Republican Liberty Caucus, and we are the Ron Paul wing of the Republican Party. So that's kind of my personal life. But I say that because I was at the Texas Republican Convention this year, and we now have 3 medical freedom groups in Texas. We have Moms for Liberty, a lot of these mama bear groups who are coming out. But I would go up to some of these medical freedom groups, and I would say, how are y'all with Trump's stand on COVID and what they did? And they were all like, oh, we hated it. And, he better not do it again. And then I would say, hey, what do y'all think of a Kennedy? And they were like, oh, we love him. He's great. And so I think there was even this movement within the Republican Party.
Interesting.
Who actually supported Mr. Kennedy, but who were just for political reasons about, I want to make sure my vote counts, or I have allegiance to a party from back when that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. So I think that at the core of what we look at, a lot of the early Kennedy support and a lot of, I guess, support overall really is linked to that question of COVID. And it's really that question of not only and I'll say it now, the pseudoscience that was given to us. During it, about, and what we found out about Fauci is like he made up the social distancing rules and some of these things. What came out afterwards, it was arbitrarily, it wasn't based on science. So that is a lot. The mandates and what happened. I don't know about you guys. I live in Texas, and my mayor closed the parks for kids for a long time. And then finally, a lot of folks who had to take the vaccine to maintain their jobs or this. And I do believe maintain their jobs to keep employment, keep their families fed. And this was, for me at least, this was the most important moment, I believe, in my lifetime politically. What happened during COVID. And I think maybe in the history of the United States, it could have been the most important time. And sitting where we are now, I think it's difficult for us to truly understand the impact that we had on our lives and just how major it was. I wish we had somebody who was up in space during that time. And then they could come back and they could say, like, wow, things have really changed and you don't realize them. But, that really, the mandates and the COVID, it really, my parents are, my parents are Church of Christ, and Church of Christ folks go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And when they closed down churches for Sunday night, they started to do other things. Wednesday night, they started to do other things. So then when the mandates lifted back up, you had folks who had for generations and generations gone to church on Sunday night and Wednesday night, and they started to fall away because there was just that hiatus. And I think there's things like, there were things such as this that we don't realize yet how important and how impactful they were on our lives. And I'm hoping really somebody comes in and studies this and says, like, this is what really happened. I think 9/11 is another example. If you didn't live in the country during 9/11 and you came back after 9/11, it was I was living in Romania at the time. So I lived in Romania. I lived in Singapore during Gulf War I and Romania during Gulf War II. And I left one United States and I came back to another United States both times. And folks who were living here through this, I don't think understood the change as much as it's somebody who is away. But that COVID response, and California, y'all had it. It was it was crazy out in California.
I think we were the first. Were we the first cities to start shutting down? If not the first, then some of the first cities. And
we have, one thing about what I've looked at in the volunteer base and the supporter base when I was on the campaign is that it's very female driven.
Tell me more.
There's a lot of the mama bear. Really prevalent in the movement. And one of my volunteers in Texas, she had actually worked to keep the parks open in her town. They had worked politically, and in the medical freedom movement, there's a lot of nurses in it. And there's a lot of, like I said, mama bears who are questioning what is going into their children's vaccines or what's going into their children's food supply. So that's, if we looked at early polling data too, you had a lot of females who were voting for Mr. Kennedy, and a lot of their husbands were voting for Donald Trump.
Interesting.
Yes. So to me, it only really makes sense about this idea that when it comes to health and the well-being of ourselves, our children, and our posterity, that, men, we love our children too, but sometimes we're a little oblivious to things. Where moms and ladies they're upfront with it and they really see the impact. And so, it's interesting.
That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Alongside the corporate capture, I'm curious. I can't tell you that I've looked deeply into libertarian politics, but from what I have gathered, some quotes have been like, capitalism is great, and this is like taking it too far, is something that I have heard in some of these podcasts. Does that align with what the PAC is saying?
Yes. I would say that the idea is that capitalism, the idea of free markets, the free exchange of goods from one person to the other, is the best system. And that, not free marketism, capitalism was actually coined by Karl Marx, the term capitalism. So before it, we could just go out and free markets. So free markets are the best way. But what happens is that we don't have free markets in America anymore. We have an economy that is more resembles, say, Nazi German economy, where you have government working closely with corporations to enrich corporations and empower government. And that is sort of where we went wrong. And if you were to remove the corporate capture out of government, you would remove a lot of the reasons for corporations to interfere with government. And I kind of use this as an example. So you have this individual here who is a taxpayer. And then next to it, and then you have government. Corporations come to government and they try to pass laws
Yes.
to help enrich them using the taxpayer money.
Right.
And that's kind of like the idea of corporate capture. But if you could keep Washington and corporations separate, you wouldn't have corporations coming to Washington saying, hey, this is a great plan. Let's do this. Let's use, we need you to legalize this pesticide, or we need you to go into war here. And at the end of the day, all these activities, what they are is they're just a way to transfer our wealth through our hard work from us to corporations. And I think the SNAP program is a great example of that.
Okay.
And my example is that SNAP is important, and the nutrition of Americans is important. And it's good that we have folks in government who are looking at it and saying that we need to make sure Americans are well fed. But what happens with a lot of the money that goes to SNAP? Where does it go? A lot of times it's spent in food deserts. So it's spent at convenience stores, or it's spent in grocery stores. It's spent on big pharma products. So what happens is that money that is taken from taxpayers and is used for the SNAP program, instead of really enriching the folks, what it does is that's just a transfer, and it just goes directly to these big corporations.
Gotcha.
That they're just pass-throughs. And so corporations are dictating what is in the SNAP program. They're dictating what our nutrition is supposed to look like. And they're just methods for them to just take money from us one way or the other. And that has to end.
I love this. Let's stick with the food deserts for a sec, because yes, the people will spend, money where they live, and oftentimes, there are not grocery stores there. What do you think would either be a bridge or like something like a bigger picture solution that was either divorced from government and corporations, or like, what do you see being the kind of solution, do you think there?
I knew you were going to ask this question. So I
you're ready.
I thought about this last night.
Okay.
And I really don't, I don't necessarily, the food desert question often puzzles me, because how do you get mom and pop shops to come in these neighborhoods, or how do you get companies to come in these neighborhoods that aren't otherwise there?
Yeah.
And what was there before this? Because obviously there were these neighborhoods neighborhoods were there, and they had grocery stores, and they had this. But the idea, I guess, would be to how we could create limiting. And I would imagine things like the SNAP program actually helps a lot of these corporate convenience stores go into these areas, because a lot of their revenue is generated out of SNAP. So I would say that one of the things that we could do, we could change the foods that are allowed on SNAP. I mean, it seems crazy to me that you can go into 7-Eleven, and I love 7-Eleven, so I'm not knocking them. I think it's originally a Texas company. So yes, it was open from 7 to 11.
Yeah, I remember those.
But it seems ridiculous to me that some of these foods that we have, like some of the pizzas they have, some of the foods that they have, that these are foods that people are able to buy with their SNAP that we know are bad for them. We know that long-term exposure to these products are going to cause health problems.
Okay.
So if we limited the idea, good kind of smart people who are nutritionists and dietitians who are actually designing what our nutrition program should be, instead of corporations telling us what we should eat and how we should eat, because they're not going to be truthful. They're what they think we should have comes down to their bottom line,
whatever it is.
Yes. So the food desert thing is going to become even bigger issue as we see it's harder and harder for these small bodegas or for these small mom and pops to operate. And I don't know what it's like in California, but every new business that I see start up now is a corporation. So it's very rare that I'll see, say a gas station will start up and it'll be a mom and pop gas station.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Circle K. It's always a 7-Eleven. It's one of these. So, I mean, we definitely have to change this direction. Some of it might come with education.
Okay.
I think in educating folks. But I read the intro to your book, and what I found is that we have had education, but it's the wrong kind of education.
There we are.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
this is, there are these systemic problems within our system that we have to address internally ourselves, and we have to see how that translates, how corporations and how we affect other people with it.
Yeah. One of the things that I was listening to was talking about how, we've had these interventions, we've had, all these prescriptions and medications, say for high cholesterol and high blood pressure was one that was mentioned. But like overall, as a country, these rates are not going down, even though we've had all these medications. And I was thinking about that, how similarly, like we have these dietary guidelines, we have, all these nutrition recommendations, but that is not making, in the bigger picture, people are not getting healthier. They're not getting more access to fruits and vegetables. Specifically, Harvard, which is, a place that folks were saying with a lot of government funding, has been talking about the Mediterranean diet forever. And that does not mean that, more of us are able,
Right.
to go out and buy those foods. So yeah, what are we doing?
And it's a lot of what's available to us. And the idea that less times have changed, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we came home and I was fortunate enough to have grown up a small town kid having dinner around the dinner table. And I know I can't project this and say that every American had this at one time, because that wasn't the case, but it seems like less and less Americans are having that. And I was fortunate to be able to afford that. But even folks who can't afford that now, the time is so short that it's, let's stop by a fast food restaurant, or let's get some to-go meal from the grocery store. So this idea of this home cooked meal, these ingredients from scratch, is becoming less and less. And on top of that, I think it's becoming, what you look at the grocery store, at least in a lot of places, your selections are getting less and less, especially when it comes to fruits and vegetables. You might have 30 different types of potatoes or 8 types of onions. But when it really comes to just the overall selection of what you have, it's becoming less and less, and it's becoming more and more expensive. This idea of being able to buy fresh vegetables, be able to buy affordable food, it's just becoming more difficult. It's bad when nowadays you go to we have Dairy Queen, and you go to Dairy Queen or Whataburger, and it's it's $35 for 2 people to eat. That this idea of even this cheap food that folks used to eat, like now that food, it's expensive, and America's, I don't like to be, I'm not a pessimistic person, but like I said, I'm 51. I'm 51 years old. I'm the Generation X, and we really got to figure out what's going on, and we have to turn the tide and change things, because we can't continue to go down this path that we're on. There's a Turkish quote that I love. It says, "No matter how far you are down the wrong road, you have to realize you're on the wrong road and turn back and start walking the other way."
Gotcha.
And I think it's time we start looking back. It'd be nice. I love this. My local school school, they're teaching gardening again. My wife is a member of Master Gardeners, and that's a program part from the state. And it seems to me that they're starting to change their focus more on, 1, natives, which is awesome, and 2, they're starting to talk about growing food more often. And so I think that what we're having is sort of a trend about, we're seeing the importance of growing food. We're having this. It'd be nice that if we could enter a stage where we went back and everybody had their own little garden or victory gardens.
Sure would.
But, but once again, it's expensive and it's difficult to do this. So we're in this point where prices are rising. And I don't think it's really for any one political party or one person to blame. It's just that prices are rising, inflation, and that our selections are narrowing. And what to do about that, I'm not too sure, but that's why we need to elect good folks who are smarter than I know how to get people to vote. but who actually have good answers for these to help make these policies and bring these new ideas to government.
Yeah. So would the first next steps be getting, RFK some, as an advisor for you all, or is that like the first next step?
Oh, for Mr. Kennedy, we have advisors from within our group and within the movement. So Mr. Kennedy, our next step is to get him as an advisor to President Trump. He's already been our advisor. So we've had that relationship in the past and we're looking to actually expand the movement outside of Mr. Kennedy, because it's really important to have a torchbearer and a standard bearer. Mm-hmm. And I think Mr. Kennedy has done that very well. And he's a person he's 70 years old.
Yeah.
And he spent his lifetime never expecting to enter politics. Oh, so in the later years of his life, he enters politics. Mm-hmm. And because he never planned on enter politics, he talked in a truthful way with people. Mm-hmm. He would have times where he would have honest conversations with somebody, and 5 years later, like a good person, his ideas would change and he would grow and it would mature. Mm-hmm. And for a political person, that's bad to do, because one thing that the news and the media and the folks who are trying to define you, what they want is they want you to have this consistent, unchanging message for 20, 30 years. So you didn't have that. One of the persons is out in your Nicole Shanahan. I think she is going to be, she was Mr. Kennedy's vice president pick. And she is, I believe, 40 years old or under 40. Nice. And I think she's going to have a lifetime of, she's smart. She's successful. She's a great mama bear. Mm-hmm. There's going to be time going forward. A lot of these other folks, I also think Mr. Kennedy is helping making, you named some of them earlier, some of these folks who we've seen doing the podcast. Mm-hmm. And these folks are going to have, I believe Mr. Kennedy is going to help them have a bigger presence.
Yeah.
And one thing, just on a kind of a personal note, and just seeing Mr. Kennedy, how it works, he's had the fortunate ability to meet with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And to find out a lot of these ideas have come to him from other people. So if he can help blaze the trail, mm-hmm. there's a lot of other warriors and a lot of other intelligent people are there mm-hmm. who can follow and who can really make the change. Mm-hmm. So that's why I kind of like talked about him. He is in some ways kind of like Moses. I think he's the one who has brought the movement to this place, and he's pointing it. And then you have this cadre of other folks who are actually, I think, going to be the ones who you really see are the doers and able to make mm-hmm. the change that just, it's going to be difficult for Mr. Kennedy.
Got it. That makes so much sense. Do you know if anybody would be interested in coming on and chatting about their ideas?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. I can email you for those. That would be amazing.
Yeah. I love to. I mean, this is, like I said, when I found out when you first reached out, I did a little research, and I read what the write-up of your book was. And it was things that I had heard, but I had not necessarily really started to think about. And then I kind of, and I realized exactly where you were coming from and where we were coming from in that place where we really met. And I think this is what you're doing is great. And bringing this awareness in your background, especially as a dietitian, and understanding food, and understanding also that it seems to me that I go back to this, that we've been taught these things about food, or we've been told these things about health expectations, but they haven't necessarily come from a genuine place.
Yeah.
And folks who have picked it up have used it as a way to make money and not make us healthy.
All right. I really look forward to continuing this conversation. We can, chat again or keep in touch and see, how Make America Healthy Again is progressing, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I'd love to. And I mean, good luck to you with what you're doing, and keep up what you're doing too. And I definitely will reach out in the next day or two, and I'll give you some names of some folks who I think you would enjoy talking to, and can be a really good conversation, because you have an understanding of things on the grassroots level when it comes to this. And I'd love to be able to bring some of our experts and be able to talk to you about that and really dive into it.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me once again.
All right. Thanks so much to Jeff for coming on the show. I truly look forward to seeing how this conversation develops and what happens to these talking points after November 5th, whatever the outcome. Again, if you have thoughts on this, the wellness of it all, you can email it to makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com. If you're interested in how to support the show, you can visit the show notes, and you can also rate and review the show. Many thanks in advance. Until next time, keep making it awkward, friends. This has been Making It Awkward. I'm your host and awkward dietitian, Jessica Wilson. The show is edited and mixed by the Political Action Committee that is Jen Jacobs. It's a production of The Body Politic and is supported by the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services.